Hi, everyone. Thank you for staying. I hope lunch was good. It looked good. I never eat at these things. I just told someone that. I think the previous speakers were kind of tall. Okay. All right. Guys, you can hear me? You know, I wanted to, before we go any further, I wanted to thank, we have some people who are leaders in our field who didn't speak today, but just to acknowledge, we have Olga from the ARC program, who specializes in family support. We have Audrey Winkler, Executive Director of Jesby House. You're going to be hearing from Tom Taranto from United Way shortly. You can clap for him. He's doing a lot of great work. We had someone from ASUN Consulting, Nikki. She's not here. I guess she left. And we had Linda Wiesenack, who's wonderful. If you've worked with Linda, she provides services to children. And we have Shoshana from HIP. HIP is another support coordination agency, and they do a wonderful job, by the way. The name of my agency that you may be aware of is Infinity Today, and that's for support coordination. However, that's not why we're here today. We're here for Infinity Tomorrow, which is a 501c3 that provides emergency funding for people living in unlicensed settings. And what we can do is provide vouchers for up to $500 per year per person, although we have limited funds, that will enable the person to live safely in the community when needed. So we try to limit the giving of those funds to people who really need them. For people who may not be working, for people whose situations, for one reason or another, are not going to allow him or her to get his needs met. Just to give you an example, we have one individual that just was approved for funding for a special piece of furniture because of a medical concern, and we were able to pay for the majority of that. As I said, it's a nonprofit. It's a voluntary agency, and I serve as the volunteer board president. It's not anything that any of our, I'm actually the only staff. It's not anything that I get paid for. What we do is we promise at this point, will it change? It might at one point, depending on how large we get. We promise that 100% of the funds go directly to the individual. So any donations that we get go directly to the people who are living independently in the community. And it's something that it's very grassroots, and it's something that that's very close and dear to me. We began providing these this year. We initially started to focus on people who were using Infinity Today support coordination services because we had such limited funds, but I believe we've opened up to other providers also. So if you have someone who's living independently, who may need something that's not funded by the budget, we may be able to help. And I think that that's the purpose of this whole discussion. And I so much thank Roman and his staff for putting this whole thing together for us. What the goal here is to look at alternatives for people that, regardless of the funding that's attached to them, but based on whether or not the funds that they have, whether or not the resources they have could pay for the services they need. And sometimes, unfortunately, the answer is not going to be yes. It's going to depend really on what that person's needs are. However, when you have somebody who is more independent, who have limited funds, it is feasible for that person to live in a manner that's not offering increased risk. The individual can feasibly, and we heard from Attain and Gain about the service that they have, the staffing service that they have, that would also provide some case management services included. And Abby Greenberg was talking a little bit about the different resources that are available, and we have to really make sure that that independent person is utilizing all the other resources that he or she is entitled to. So what is that? If the person is a Medicaid recipient, which they have to be, then that person may be eligible for what's called certified home health. And what that is that's staffing that's paid for directly from Medicaid, directly from the HMO, not from DDD. That's staffing that's separate from the money that the individual is entitled to through DDD. And that's something that needs to be considered and absolutely should be requested by you to the HMO in order to get those services. It's going to be different type staffing. It's not necessarily going to be staffing where the individual is going to learn how to do different tasks like cook or do his or her own laundry, but rather it will be more custodial type, and the individual, the staff person will actually take care of the person. Say the person needs help shaving, to do an adequate job shaving. The person needs some light cleaning done. The person needs some light shopping done in the community. The certified home health aide can do that. And if you are living on your own with your budget, you're a tier A, and you have a budget of roughly $19,000 a year from DDD, it's feasible that you would be able to get your certified home health staff, your minimum staff from the DDD budget, and some sort of, it sounded like, based on what was said by Diana Flanagan, that some sort of support through behavioral. And so is that for everyone? Absolutely not. But it is a possibility for someone who is more independent. Other options, and I had mentioned Audrey Winkler from Jesby House, is Jesby House, which is in South Orange, and provides a variety of housing opportunities for people of different needs. And we're going to be hearing from United Way shortly. We're living in a much different time, and while there's still inadequate funding for those gray areas, there are opportunities, and I think that it's important for you as the individual or the guardian or the caregiver or friend, that you make sure that those opportunities are reviewed and considered. One of my favorite things that Roman provides is his Uber service, which I hope that many of you take advantage of, which allows people, there you go, applaud it, it's a great service. So that allows people to go beyond Access Link when they need to use transportation. And not that Access Link is, it is terrible actually. Access Link is terrible. But it's free, almost free. And sometimes there's certainly a benefit to that. But at least there's an alternative. And I think that what we need to do is always consider those alternatives. We have to look outside of the box. We have to look outside of the group home. You know, when I first started in the field, I started as a direct care worker in New York. And people were first coming out of, at that time, you may have heard of Willowbrook. Willowbrook was an institution in Staten Island. And Geraldo Rivera did an expose, and it ended up to the closure of Willowbrook, and all the Willowbrook people started coming out into the community. And I worked at an agency, and that's who you mostly were working with in New York at the time. I was doing housing for an agency that really focused on those Willowbrook people. And those homes were called ICFs, Intermediate Care Facilities. And what those are kind of like mini institutions. So we went from the big institutions to smaller institutions. And we went from that to group homes in New Jersey. We call them group homes. That had, when I started in New Jersey, as I was, and I don't know if you're aware of it, but I'm the former executive director of JAD, Jewish Association for Developmental Disabilities. But at the time, we had housing for 6 people, and that was permitted. And then it became 5 people, and 4 people, and I think it might be 3. It's 4, does anyone know? 4? 4 people. Everything is getting smaller, and the things that we're talking about are smaller. And one of the things that we were talking about the independent housing for people who are that Tier A, but what about the people who aren't Tier A? What about the people who are Tier E? Or people who are not on the support program, but on CCP? Now remember, there's a difference. Support program is for people who are living in the community without residential support. CCP means that this residential support is added in. That's essentially the big difference. It's feasible, and people have been talking about this, and I'm seeing projects like this. More and more of them coming up, where people are living with a full-time live-in aide in a 2-bedroom apartment, and they're doing so instead of going into a group home placement. And you hear a lot of times, well, I want my son or daughter to have a social life and be with other people and to have friends and I understand that. And I'm not saying that the model, the 24-hour model in this 2-bedroom apartment that I just mentioned is for everybody. But it may be for you. And it may be the best thing for you or your loved one. And it's something that you need to look at. And as I said, I'm seeing more and more cases that are utilizing that. We have right now, I can say off the top of my head, we have 3 people in 2019 who either have set that up or are in the process of setting that up. So it is feasible that the group home option is not your only option. And that's something you need to consider. You do need to be CCP in order to be eligible for someone staffed at that level of care. But you have options, and it's something that everyone needs to be aware of.
Errol, what is CCP?
CCP is the Community Care Program. It used to be called CCW, and next week it'll probably be called something else. But right now it's CCP. And what that stands for, essentially what that means is that there's a residential budget. In your budgets, if you're on the supports program, you have essentially 2 buckets of money. One money is for day habilitation and vocational, and one bucket is for supports. And that's kind of flexible. You have a lot of flexibility with it. That's where the Uber money comes from. And then you have your 3rd bucket when you're CCP, that's for residential purposes. Residential, it used to be, when I ran group homes, it used to be that the group home budget included food and utilities and cable and clothes. It doesn't happen anymore. So with the flexibility, with the great thing about breaking down the walls, some things have become a little bit more cumbersome. You don't get paid, the group home agency, if you're living in a group home agency, is not getting paid for any of those other things right now. They're only getting paid for staffing, 24/7 staffing. They're paid the rest of the money, the rest of the things like utilities or food or what the other stuff is typically coming from the individual's income, which includes Social Security. So what that means is, if a person, say, is getting Social Security, I'm just going to throw a number out, $800 a month, which is often a common number. The agency where the person is living is going to ask you to pay a portion of that $800, maybe the whole thing, to pay for the other things that the person needs. like food and utilities and things like that. That's going to be rent. And the budget, the CCP budget, is only staffing. That's all that's going to be applied towards that budget. It's 7 days of staff. And if you take a look at your CCP budget, if you're living, say, in a group home setting, and you divide the residential piece by 7, that's what you'll see. That it's just for staffing purposes. I don't know how long I'm supposed to speak, and I don't even. I'm not even sure when I started. But Roman, you just tell me, when I have to stop. You guys definitely want to hear from United Way, because I think that you're going to be very pleased with what you say. But I'll answer questions until someone tells me to leave. But no one's here. You guys tell me to leave. Emily, you'll be in charge. Okay. I have a question.
Yes, about the living in an apartment with an aide. Is the aide working 24/7 for you, or you mean you're just renting an apartment with another person who provides some support?
That's a good question. The question is, if you're living if you have a 2-bedroom apartment, you're living with a staff person, is that staff person 24 hours, 7 days a week? The answer is perhaps. We live in a flexible system. Perhaps that person is a 24/7 staff. Perhaps that person is on shift. It may not be a 24/7 staff. I don't know whether or not you would be able to use the voucher for a 2-bedroom if the person was on shift. Based on what Courtney had said, you were allowed to do it for living. I'm not sure if you can do it for staffing. We would have to look into that. But as far as from a budget perspective, if you weren't getting the voucher, if you had a 2-bedroom apartment and that your family owned, or you rented a 2-bedroom apartment on your own without the voucher, you absolutely could do that. You can have the staff person work, if the staff person was working 3 days a week, they could